Welcome to our Book Reporter Talks To interview, where our guest today is Don Winslow, author of the recently released Broken, which is a collection of 6 tightly written and brilliantly, and I mean brilliantly, plotted novellas. One of my favorite books of Don's, which I happen to find on my shelf at home, it's not in the office, is The Dawn Patrol, a book that made me wish that I knew how to stand up on a surfboard, which I can't do. So I have to settle for sitting on the beach. But this is my voyeuristic, ode to going and sitting and on a surfboard somewhere. So welcome, Don. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And we can get you standing up on a surfboard.
Okay, I'll fly out. We'll figure this out after we social distance.
I'm on the East Coast in the summer. You can come up to Rhode Island.
That's it. That's it. We're ready to go now.
There's the answer.
So what prompted you to write these 6 novellas?
You know, for most of the past 20 years, I've been writing these long kind of epic novels, mostly about the war on drugs. All during that time, though, I had some of these stories in my head. Others are quite new. And I knew that they weren't epics like the drug books, but they were more substantive than short stories. They were somewhere in that middle length. And so finishing The Border, which was the end of that trilogy, I thought, well, all right, I'll take a little breath now. I'll sit down and see if any of these stories have legs.
So did you have notes on any of them? Like, are you one of these people who they were all original ideas, like you just sat down and said, I'm going to try and do this with no notes in advance?
Yeah, I don't do notes. I don't mean to be glib. I mean, seriously, I feel that if I were to do notes or extensive notes or outlines, that I know myself well enough to know that I would slavishly follow them. Irish Catholic boy that I am, I would obey my outline that the nuns taught me how to do. So I always want to be open to the possibility of surprises, and so I don't outline.
Don't outline.
I just kind of have it in my head.
So for any of these where you're just sitting there, and we'll get into this more about the characters, I'd like to revisit this, or I'd like to revisit that. There was nothing. It was like, really, you just sat down and said, let me try and write these 6 separate stories.
Pretty much. Listen, you have little small ideas in your head. Like there's one of them called Crime 101. And I just had that phrase in my head. And I thought, I love Highway 101 in California. It's just one of my favorite places to be. I never get bored driving it. I lived on it for a number of years. And I thought, Highway 101, Crime 101, is there a place those two concepts could meet? And so I sat down and started typing, let's find out. So that was pretty much the case with most of these.
Most of the stories. We're going to get into Crime 101 because you made me really relive driving down the 101. And
I'm glad.
It's fun. Encinitas, like as you're pulling into town, you had all those little tiny details. The book plays like an album to me. And here's what I'm seeing. It opens explosively with Broken, which I feel like set up readers for what they were going to be getting into. Like we've got this big, powerful. It's like the single off the album that's going to get airplay, and it's going to get listeners wanting more. And was that always the opener, or as you looking at the 6 pieces? Because I feel like that one was supposed to be there.
Yeah, I'm grateful you said that, because I thought of it as an album. That was very much in my head in putting the stories together, because just as you alluded to, I wanted that opening theme, that sets the tone for everything else. And I knew I would close on not identical, but similar chords, not to be too pretentious about it. But in the middle, I wanted to play some different tunes, the way that you might in an album, and the way that I hope, what I always loved about albums in the days when we had them, was that they took you on a trip. And you started with this opening theme, and it's always there, but then you went through fast tunes, you went through slower tunes, you went through softer tunes, and then you come back to that opening theme, that resolves it. So I thought of it very much as a musical album.
I was thinking of Bridge Over Troubled Water when I was reading this, because it opens with Bridge Over Troubled Water, which that wasn't originally going to be the single. That wasn't originally going to be the single off that album. Huge Simon & Garfunkel fan here. But as that whole album got paced together, and how if one song was in a different order, which is what everyone can do now, you can reorder on your own, doesn't have the same feeling. It just doesn't have that same. And what
it doesn't have that Beatles, moody blues. kind of feel to it, or jazz. I'm a big jazz guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so in writing this and a classic jazz albums like John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, which starts with this, bang,
In
and
it.
then
Yeah.
moves in and out of other kinds of feelings. So I had those kind of things in mind as well.
Yeah, I definitely felt it. I felt like, okay, this is going to be, setting the whole story up. So let's talk a little bit about Broken, the first story. It's
Okay.
this very powerful, it's revenge that was the word I was seeing about it.
It's a revenge story, flat out revenge story. But I wanted to try to take a slightly different slant on the revenge story and look at what revenge costs.
Mm-hmm.
What's the real cost of going out and doing that, and where does it leave you at the end, and where do you go from there? And that's really what I was trying to get at with Broken. Now look, it's a crime story. I'm a crime fiction writer. I don't want to get too heavy, or pretentious about this, but that's what I had in mind.
Yeah, and when you're sitting there, you're looking at, okay, what did you do? You feel better? Do you really? You're not quite sure. And you can play that into a lot about life, because I feel like that story could be applicable to so many things of, so you got your way, or did you? What really ended up in the end?
Yeah, what really happened. And even if you don't do it to yourself, in this kind of world of crime, if you will, it does leave you broken.
Mm-hmm.
Cops and criminals, people on either side of that spectrum or in the middle, lawyers, reporters, judges, parole officers, all kinds of folks who see these things and experience these things on a day-to-day basis, first responders and
Yeah.
dispatchers.
I was also
There's a
thinking,
brokenness about it. I'm sorry.
no, I was thinking, I meant, didn't mean to interrupt, but I was thinking about, a lawyer goes and does a case and they so and fight for somebody. They finish the case and the person goes out and does it again. And you're like, I believed you. I
Yeah.
believed in what you were saying. I believed in what you were doing. And it can break the spirit of that person just as much as everybody else around them.
Yeah, and has very often. The burnout rate for defense attorneys is enormous because of that. Because a lot of times they're just cutting deals. They might have an innocent person, and they know they can't, get them off.
Mm-hmm.
So they get them the best deal that they can. And lawyers live with that kind of thing. Or as you just alluded to, the person you believed in and defended, and then you find out they're guilty. Lawyers generally acknowledge their clients are guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a cynicism to that I think has a cost.
There's going in and acting in the courtroom. You end up acting. It's like, I'm going to do this just to get what I need.
I call criminal defense lawyers agents in reverse. They get their clients less than they deserve.
I like that. I like that. Good line. So I've spent time driving down the 101. So we're going to move down the Pacific Coast Highway.
Cool. Good.
I've been down there so many times. You made me feel like I was there. I was like this armchair traveler from captive in my home going down the 101. And there's really something special about that road that you captured. The mountains on one side as you're driving down at points, the water across the other. And I feel like it deserved to star in a story. If any road deserves to star, it's one of them. You clearly love it. So what does the 101 mean to you?
I came out to California from the East Coast around 1989 as an investigator. Mm-hmm. And about a year into that, I had a day off, unexpected day off. I think a witness popped out or something. I don't remember the details. And so I got in my rent-a-car and thought, I'm going to the beach, the California beach. I'm going to drive down the 101. I fell in love immediately. Mm-hmm. Immediately. I remember phoning my wife from a place called Point Reef Beach, Laguna Beach, basically, mm-hmm. and saying, I don't know why we don't live here. And I just kept taking more and more work out here. And my wife would join me when she had vacations. And one night in Laguna Beach, she looked across a dinner table at me and said, the idea of going back makes me physically ill.
Oh, wow.
And I said, great, let's not do it. I'll take more work, go shopping tomorrow, buy some clothes. We lived in hotels for 3 years.
Really?
My wife and a little boy, toddler then. And we lived in hotels in and around the 101 from LA down to San Diego, depending on what the case was. And I have always been in love with it. I've driven it thousands of times. I've walked it. I never ever get bored or tired of it. It's always a thrill to me when I'm there.
Yeah, we drove from San Diego up to San Francisco, and
Perfect.
yeah, we drove the inside way. The outside way, and if
Yeah.
we're going south, I would be a little bit more nervous. We
Yeah.
drove, and it's just such a spectacular, because you're seeing what's happening on the east side, but
Mhm.
this beautiful ocean in front of you. But you just captured what happens. We're also talking cars here, because
Yeah.
the guys in my house are car people.
All
So I
right.
was sitting there, and they're like a lot of muscle cars, and cars say a lot about a person in this
Yeah.
book as he's switching cars and whatever. What about you and cars? Are you a car
I'm not a
guy?
car guy. I'm not. I've owned 2 cars in 20 years. However, both of them are Mustangs.
Okay. All right. There's the answer.
So I have a fondness for American muscle cars. I do, but the idea behind Cars with this piece was more related to Steve McQueen,
Okay.
because one of the protagonists in the story, this thief, has just very deliberately modeled himself after the image of Steve McQueen that he saw in film. And so he goes up and down the 101 doing that. And, for me, McQueen was the embodiment of California cool.
Yeah.
You know, he,
Exactly.
I write about that culture a lot, and he almost invented it for us. At least he showed it to us in film, 30 feet high and
Hmm.
colorful and kinetic. And so that was really the car thing in this piece.
In each of the cars, I found myself looking at pictures of them, like,
Oh, you
trying to
did?
figure out.
Yeah.
It's really, they are the big muscle cars, and it's something that you don't see. You see more of these cars in California because you don't have to worry about rust. Because
Right.
the cars, as they age, you're okay. My son's restoring a Land Rover right now, and he bought
Yeah.
the one from Atlanta with the least amount of rust on it. But
Uh,
out in California, you can have the cars because the weather's not, the salt's not
yes,
killing them and
it
things like
doesn't
that.
eat them like it does in Rhode Island. Tell your son that I used to ride around in the original Land Rover. It exists on safari in Africa. So I used to be a safari guide
Really?
at a
I
place
will
called
tell him.
Laywood Downs, and we would use it to take clients out for night drives in the original safari Land Rover.
He may want to interview you. He does. He makes a lot of pieces about Land Rover. That'd be so much fun. He just saw the one that was here over in the States that had done the original run all across Europe, to
Oh yeah,
Asia.
right, right.
So
Yeah,
he saw that. Yeah. So it's
yeah,
like lots of fun.
yeah.
So now for the third story, the San Diego Zoo,
All right. Okay.
it had a lot of new meaning to me, as I just given 7 hours of my life that I wish I could get back to the Tiger King on Netflix. I wish I could grab that time back. But it opens with this line, "No one knows how the chimp got the revolver." And I was thinking, wow, score one for the animals in captivity, flipping it back to everybody else. And I just
Right.
saw that. So did you have that one line rattling your cage? I have to do that line for a while.
It was good. For years, for years, it was rattling in my cage. I can't tell you why. Uh, it just struck me funny,
Mm-hmm.
you
It
know.
is.
And then so one day I just sat down at the keyboard and thought, all right, Winslow, how did the chimp get the revolver? And so what? I mean, what happens if a chimp got a revolver and got out of the zoo? And who would have to respond to it? And what would his life be like? And I would just made the story up as I went along.
Well, I think it's so funny because in the age of social media, everybody goes, "Hey, you're the chimp guy. Hey, you're the
Right.
chimp
Yeah.
guy." And all of a sudden, that's how you become known. And it's such a play. You do such a good job of weaving in real life pop culture and, with the references, with the cars and with everything. But with this, I was just there like, that is exactly what would be happening to this person and how he'd be known.
Yeah. He becomes the monkey man.
Yeah.
They leave bananas around his locker and, old Tarzan posters and that kind of thing. Yeah. And you wonder, how would you respond to that?
How would you do that? How would you do that? So then we've got the next story is Sunset. And I felt like I was back in the Dawn Patrol. And you make readers feel like they're part of the lineup. Like you feel like you actually are sitting out there, you're sitting on the water with everybody else, and they're all waiting to catch the perfect wave. So you surfed growing up. Do you still?
Yeah, I do. Look, Laird Hamilton has nothing to worry about for me. Kelly Slater,
What's
if
that book? The Wave. The Wave. I read
right,
that book years ago. Yep.
yeah, it's a good book. If falling and swimming is great surfing, you're like, I'm a trophy winner. But yeah, I do. I get out there, sure.
You sit there and line up. My friend Katie Arnaldi has a place up in Malibu on the beach. Like this,
Yeah.
her parents bought in the 50s, like the
Wow.
original, she's got the original cabin and everything like this.
Nice. Yeah.
And she's really funny because she looked out the window when we was there for dinner one night and she says, look at all those people. They're in my backyard. That's yoga on the water. All they're doing is sitting in my backyard on their surfboard. They're not doing anything. There are no waves,
Some people call it the only sport where people watch it when nothing's happening.
Right, right,
Just
for hours.
look at the water. We used to live in Solana Beach, where the character in Crime 101 moved to, that apartment. And every night at sunset, we'd go out on a little balcony and you'd watch people come out with glasses of wine. And the fascinating thing to me was the surfers would all turn around. They'd stop what they were doing and sit on the boards and just watch the sunset. It was sort of a ritual, almost religious sort of experience.
Yeah, and even if there was a big one, it was like, no, this is where we are. We're not going to ride. We're just going to sit there and enjoy the sunset.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch. But I wanted this to be sort of a goodbye story in many ways. In some ways it's about loss. It's about the end of the day. It's about the loss of a spouse, the loss of a way of living, the loss of a hero. In Boone's case, Boone being the main character from the Dawn Patrol and other stuff. And so that sunset, when you're watching that, as beautiful as it is, it's the end of something.
Wow. I remember we used to spend a lot of time on the Outer Banks, and I used to go out and take pictures of the sunset all the time. And that last one before you were going home was always like, wait, when am I going to get back? When am I going to see it from this view? And I think that the story, it's got like this ending is coming, and you actually are watching the sun going down as you're reading the story, and you realize you're going to this very special place. But it's also, you're having a beautiful experience, and then it's going to be, okay, over and out.
Yeah, it's over. Sunsets are always very bittersweet.
Mm-hmm. Even the most beautiful ones. Even the most beautiful ones.
Yeah. And you can't stop it. You can't freeze it. You just, that's just it.
And sometimes you go back to get the camera and it's over. Like sometimes I feel like it drops more quickly. And I'm like, wait a second, I had an extra 10 minutes last night. What's going on here?
Right. Or the clouds or something, Yeah, you got to be there to be there. That's just it.
And I think that that's a lot about what the book was too. We were there in this moment. We were all there in this moment, and then the moment ended. And I think that you do such a brilliant job of playing the word back and forth within the story.
Oh, well, thank you. And I also wanted to bring in old friends. There are characters, Boone Daniels from the other books, and then a guy named Neil Carey, who was my first character, the guy from my first 5 books. And people ask me about those guys all the time. What happened to Boone? Are we ever going to see Neil again? And so I thought, well, this might be the place to bring these people in and, let them interact and see what happens.
Yeah, our reviewer, Joe Hartlub, who's been reviewing you for probably most of your career at this point, actually gave me some questions because he says, I just want to know why like all these things are happening, because he loved seeing all those people come back. He said, because while you're known for the trilogy at this point, there are a lot of people who got to know you and were fans all along the way. And these are the people you're bringing back for them to meet. Yeah. And he said, the guys in the Dawn Patrol, they were all, let me see if I can find my exact notes from him, because they were all these very interesting characters that each had a separate role that would help round out what they were doing. And at the same time, they were individual people, but together when they formed this Dawn Patrol and when they went off to their other lives, because they all had other lives that kind of intertwined during the day, they were like a cohesive group. So maybe for those who don't know, you can give them a little bit on who the Dawn Patrol actually were. Sure. Who were those guys?
Sure. The Dawn Patrol is a surfing term that refers to the first surf session of the day. And literally at dawn, at first light, because it's mostly working people who have to get to jobs. And so they come out. In this specific case, the Dawn Patrol refers to this set of very dear friends who surf around Crystal Pier in Pacific Beach in San Diego, California. And the sort of leader is Boone, who's a PI who works only enough to support his surfing Jones. And then there are people like Sunny Day, who's probably the best surfer of them, this woman who goes off on the pro circuit, and Johnny Banzai, who's a Japanese-American homicide detective, and High Tide, who's a 350-pound Samoan dude, and Hang 12, who's a hippie who happens to have 6 toes on each foot, hence the name. And they're a very tight-knit crew. You know, they're the family you create rather than the family that you're born into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's realistic with surf communities, because when you're out there with a crew like that, your lives can depend on each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
You know?
very, very much, it's not just you're on the water, it's you might need each other.
Yeah, yeah. You might need to know that person's going to pull you out. You get hit with a board and you're unconscious. You know, you're under the water in what they call the washing machine, getting rolled around. It's good to know someone's looking for you.
See, that's the reason I don't surf. It's the washing machine.
We'll get you in a little softer.
A little softer.
Cycle, yeah.
So Paradise made me think about Hawaii beyond palm trees and white sand. I mean, for years, it's just da-da-da. They're places we imagine as one place, but underneath them, there's this whole other coda going on. There's this whole other rhythm that I saw to the place. And the reference to Puff the Magic Dragon completely evaded me before this.
Is that right?
Yeah, somehow I didn't get
Dear
it.
sweet child.
Well, I don't know why I missed this, but that whole section there and why they picked this one particular part to go to in Hawaii was just, it's another great taking the story to another level.
Yeah, you know, when you look at Paradise, it is beautiful on the surface always, and that's very, very real. It's like looking at the ocean. You look at a wave and you see something on top of the water that is as real as anything else and genuinely beautiful, but you know that to create that wave, something was happening under the water. Mm-hmm. In the dark water. And that's noir fiction, isn't it? Noir fiction asks you to dive beneath the surface into the dark, what the word means, to explore what's happening in that underworld. Now, Hanalei in Kauai, Hawaii is one of my favorite places in the world. I haven't been all over the world, but I've been over a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's the prettiest place in the world. It's the only other place rather than San Diego I think I could live full time. So, you know, you always want to write about places you want to be because you get to hang out there.
You get
to go. And so I thought, set a story there. Now, the 3 characters are dead. Mm-hmm. You know, Oliver Stone notwithstanding, they died at the end of a book called Savages. So anytime that I want to write rather about Ben, Sean, and O, the 3 protagonists, I have to go back in time. Mm-hmm. And it's silly, it's embarrassing, but I was well into the story before I remembered that I had left some other characters there in previous books years ago. And so I felt embarrassed, silly, but then I went back and I did the math. And I thought, I mean, literally with a yellow manuscript pad, you know, going, okay, this guy would be this old and they would be here and da-da-da-da, and realized I could put an older character, Bobby Z, mm-hmm. together with Ben, Sean, and O. And again, let's see what happens, you know. But Paradise is one synonym for heaven. Mm-hmm. And heaven is where we meet people who've passed on that we might want to see again.
And that's exactly what you brought everybody in this story. It's like this moment of, well, what if? What if?
Yeah,
what if?
Which is the best words that a writer can ever speak. You know, that's our game, isn't it? Yeah. Is to ask what if and go from there.
The last ride to me is the perfect ending piece. And I bet that was the one, like from the beginning, was that the last one?
Yes, I should answer verbally, yes.
It reminded me, and I don't know if you ever saw this piece on 60 Minutes that ran in April 2019. I can send you a link to it because it's a really interesting piece where they were in McAllen, Texas and Reynosa, Mexico. And they were doing this whole border story. And it was interesting to me because my younger son's first, his company has a plant in Reynosa. So he's gone down to McAllen, stayed in McAllen, goes across the border in the morning.
Sure.
So he calls me to tell me he's got this, you know, first business trip. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want you to know I signed the life insurance policy and
Mm.
you and dad are the beneficiaries. And he goes, and we're going with an armed guard every day. And now my first trip was to Beverly Hills to stay at like the Four Seasons. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? So he goes, no, 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 we're going to go down to the plant. So I had some like perspective just from there. So 60 Minutes does this piece about what's going on at the border. And the next week, they said that they never got as much mail from both sides of the aisle
Mhm.
about this particular piece because they had never seen it that way. And it was a
Right.
360 view. And I felt that that's what you gave readers in this story because you go in with the point of view, you go, whatever your point of view is going in, you then see this thing kind of spinning around you.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to write about that issue, and I don't want to get political here, but separating children from their parents and throwing them into cages is not who we should be. I never thought it was who we are, but apparently it is. And so it would have been easy to have looked at that story from the point of view of a crusading journalist or even the child, you know. But I thought it would be more interesting to look at it from the point of view of someone who changes his mind.
Mhm.
A rock-ribbed conservative Republican old cowboy who voted for Trump. And we meet him when he's repairing fence that immigrants have cut to get into the country. He's repairing fence on his property. Uh, that to me was a more interesting point of view, because look, all these things are headlines, right? And headlines have a way of becoming stereotypes. And
Mhm.
I think part of my job is to get the reader beneath the stereotype to look at individuals. And I'm convinced that some people who have certain ideas about immigration as a stereotype, illegal immigrants, if they met one immigrant, would respond differently. I live on an old ranch quite near the border, and almost all the ranchers around me are conservatives and
Mhm.
Trump voters. And there are mountains between us and Mexico that are remote, isolated places. And 5 Mexican women were dropped off at the base of those mountains by coyotes and just sort of pointed north. We had a freak snowstorm, and 3 of them died in those hills. And I could point it to you looking out the window from where I'm sitting now. There's no doubt in my mind, though, Carol, that if the old cowboys that live on the other side of the fence here, conservatives, Trump voters, had known those women were out there, they'd have been on their horses, mounted up, and looking for them.
Mhm.
So, what I was trying to get at in this story, and this story is kind of a neo-Western, isn't it?
It really is.
And I think crime fiction, American crime fiction, came out of the Western novel. It has the same sorts of moral codes and things. Uh, that I was trying to get back to that older Western moral code
Yeah. And also
where,
being
yeah,
saved.
yeah. And I think, I don't want to give away the endings to any stories, but a redemptive, in a way, kind of ending to the story and therefore to the book.
Yeah. And it totally did because when you're reading that one, it is the last ride and you feel like you're riding out, but you were also seeing, I just felt you did such a good job of bringing that story together. I just felt like that one wouldn't have gone anyplace else. And I thought the Broken was was the best opener. Did you play around with story, like which was going where?
You always do, but not so much. I really kind of knew it. We all kind of knew it. The editors and my agent and me. I just said, no, broken leads off. That's it. It starts with boom with that, and the last ride has to be exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and and then in a way, I think it allows people to look at the 2 main characters in those stories, at Jimmy McNabb and at Cal Strickland. And there's a balance there, I hope, you know.
Yeah, there's the revenge and then there's the change. It's,
Mhm.
somebody seeing a bigger story and somebody only seeing it in their narrow focus. So we're narrow focused at the beginning, eyes go a little bit wide open thread, and at the end, it goes this 360 kind of view, and you see somebody flipping around.
Yeah, someone changing his mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of what was going to do.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to decide which story I liked best. I'm playing around with this. Have people been writing you
Yeah.
saying which is their favorite? Is there a
Yeah.
clear favorite yet?
No, 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 it's all over the place. It's like the early Democratic nomination process. Yeah, our votes are scattered all over that book. Yeah, and it's funny because they're very different stories. I mean, Broken is obviously a very different story from the San Diego Zoo,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn is different from The Last Ride. But no, it's all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
People
found,
are quoting the chimp line at me a lot, though. I get a lot of that.
see, that is your moment on social media of the bananas coming at you. You
I
know,
know.
if
I'm
you
going to
were
become
on
the monkey
tour,
man. Huh?
if you were on tour right now, people would
Yeah.
be bringing bananas. See, there is something that's good about social distancing right now,
You're probably right. You're probably right. I've avoided the bananas and
Yeah.
whatever else comes with that. Yeah.
Katie Camilla, the children's author, did a book a couple years ago and had toast in it. And she said every school she went to, they said, and here's some toast, like in your book. And she said,
All
why
right.
did I not say Godiva chocolate? Why did
Yeah.
I not say?
Something better. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's,
when this is over, I can just sit there and say, yeah, you might go back on the road and there might be some bananas waiting for you. You just
it
have
could
to,
be.
it could
It could
definitely
be.
do that.
I'm really hoping right now my wife isn't watching this and I go home and there's
Banana bread, all
banana
these things.
bread, banana pudding, banana. Yeah.
Yeah. So the older characters, so they kind of still rock around in your head.
Sure. Sure. Look, I mean, my first 5 books were with Neil Carey, and that's when I had no clue what I was doing. It took me 3.5 years to write my first book, and it's not a terribly long book. So I didn't know what I was up to, I'd never done it. And so I spent a lot of time kicking around with Neil and Boone and his crew, those are kind of people I hang out with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they knock around in my head all the time.
Yeah. It just brings back, how long did it take you to write these 6 novellas? How long was this a year project or was this longer?
Yeah, I wanna, Carol, I want to say a year to a year and a half, something like that. Now, mind you, some of them I've been kicking around, and so when I sat down to write them, I kind of knew where I was headed, and in other
Or
cases,
you
I
had a
had
line
no
or
clue.
something to go from?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, Frankie Masciano from The Winter of Frankie Machine, this is Joe's question, also appears in one of the stories from Broken in a pivotal role. Now,
Mhm.
he says Frankie is arguably one of your most complex and interesting characters, a very busy guy, for those who don't know, who runs
Right.
4 businesses to support his ex-wife and daughter, who's about to start medical school. He is a sympathetic character, but there's a dark and dangerous side to him that's gradually revealed over the course of the book. Had you thought about bringing him back before this, and are we going to get to see him again?
I did not think about bringing him back. I had Ben Chan and O in Kauai. Then I remembered that I had left him in Kauai, and it was irresistible. As for Frankie's future, never say never. I just don't know. I have no immediate plans to do another Frankie piece,
Sure.
but he came in handy here.
Oh, he definitely did. When I saw that, I was like, wait a second, hold on. Now he's coming in. Now I get it,
Yeah, yeah.
So Joe also wants to know which of your primary characters from your prior novels most closely hews to your own personality, and
Mm,
which one do you least relate?
wow. Um, well, it's probably Neil Carey, and I hate saying that because he's whiny, petulant, you know, um, little bastard. But it was funny. We were at some public event one night, and someone in the audience asked, "Are you Neil Carey?" And I was shaking my head violently, and I glanced over, and my wife was nodding, just just as violently. So I think probably Neil. Which one do I least relate to? Probably a Don Barrera in
Okay.
in the drug trilogy. I
Yeah.
would say we're
You wouldn't be
miles
hanging out.
miles apart. Yeah.
You wouldn't be hanging out.
Yeah.
I feel like pacing matters a lot to you, not just in the pacing of these 6 stories, but the pacing of your work itself. At what point do you work on the pacing? Do you just get a rough, first draft down and then work on it and
Yes.
then measure it all out?
Yes. My first few drafts, I'm not thinking about the reader at all. I'm just having a good time and entertaining myself. As I get into later drafts, and I'll typically do 10 to 15 probably, uh, then I really start thinking about the reader. So toward the end of that process, that's all I'm thinking about. And all I'm thinking about is pacing. How's it going to sound to the reader's ear? How's it going to look to the reader's eye on the page? And then you're getting down to the syllable level, particularly in shorter pieces. You know that the addition or subtraction of a single syllable in a word can change the pacing, can change the rhythm, can change the look of it on the page, which we sometimes forget that reading is a physical, visual experience as well. So it has to look like what it is on the page. And so as I get more, closer and closer and closer to finishing, that's all I'm doing, is sculpting it.
And it's interesting you say that, because there were so many pages that I was looking at exactly that. There'd be just a few words in the middle of the page, or there would be something that was like a call out. And I totally picked up on that. Wait a second, there's something going on here. It's like slowing down my brain, making sure I have emphasis here. Do you read your books aloud to yourself?
I read all the dialogue out loud because I won't hear the right notes, but I will hear the wrong ones.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, they're just sour, when you know it and you go back and fix it. I rarely read the narrative prose out loud. I'll read it over and over again, but basically I look at it more than I read it. If I want to grab the reader by the front of the shirt and just pull him or her through an action sequence, then it needs to look dense on the page, because I don't want to give you a breath. I don't want to give you a stopping point. I just want to say, okay, here we go. Mm-hmm. I'll let you go, and I'm ready to let you go. Kind of like a wave. Mm-hmm. But if I want to focus the reader on a certain image that might stand for a lot of things, then I want to make sure you do have that breathing room and room for your eye. So I want a lot of negative space, like in a photo or a painting, surrounding that one or two words or whatever it happens to be. So that's really important to me.
And I think that when people are reading this, anybody who's listening to this, you will absolutely see the craft that went into just that, as well as the words on the page. It's the way the pacing all works. At what point of those 10 to 15 drafts does your editor see it? Does she see it after the 15 or somewhere along the way?
No, after. Yeah. And then they'll have notes. My agent has notes, my editor has notes, and I take them very seriously. Some I accept, because it's good to have people you trust, because I know that I'm done with a book when I've lost perspective on it. I have no idea if it's any good, and it's just beginning now. It's like white noise to me. It's blah, 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 blah. Then I know I need to get rid of it, send it away. And then it comes back with some notes, and I look at them all and probably take the majority of them.
So did you finish all 6 before you turned this into your editor and agent? Okay, so all 6 were done in this order, or like they were?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of craft at the beginning. That's a lot of craft before you get any further.
Well, it's not nice. I wouldn't be doing my job if I turned in sloppy work. Mm-hmm. And then said to them, well, here's some garbage, fix it. That would be me neglecting my job. It's not what they pay me to do. They pay me good money to give them good stuff. And so that's what I try to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then you sit there and say, okay, what's some feedback and whatever. 3 of these novels have dedications, and I like seeing these. Crime 101 goes out to Steve McQueen. San Diego Zoo shout out goes to Elmore Leonard, and Raymore Chandler gets the shout out for the Nod for Sunset. Why these dedications? What made you want to write those in?
I'm not being glib, because I could. Do you know what I mean? Here was an opportunity to tip my hat to people who've been very important to me without ever knowing it. You know, as I said earlier, I mean, Steve McQueen invented this cultural biome that I write a lot about. And so it was fun to tip the hat to him. And he plays a role in that story. Mr. Leonard, you know, was an inspiration to me when I was younger, a lot younger, and thinking about doing this and trying to work up the courage to do it. I was reading Elmore Leonard. Mm-hmm. And thinking, man, if I could write stories like that. Now, I never have, and I never will, and I never could. If I keep writing, you know, I'll never write as well as Mr. Leonard. Raymond Chandler, you know, in a similar sense as Elmore Leonard, those of us in this genre owe our livings to him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Without him, we don't exist. Without either of those two guys, you know, there's no me. I got a chance to go to Raymond Chandler's house a year or so ago, which was like going to church. You know, the people who bought it were aware that he had it and very kindly invited me to go. So I got to be in the room where The Long Goodbye was written. That's a temple, you know.
Do you think that there's enough reading back of the old masters like these days? And I feel that nobody's reading those books that really started the genre. They were, you know, the genre masters. And we look at a lot of new talent, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like
I encourage it, yeah.
If there was a look back at some of these people who got people to places, and I would be really interested to ask a group of crime writers, like, which are the seminal books that you think that people should read, at least one of, and which one they should read to try to get there?
It's funny, Michael Connelly and I were on a panel one night in San Diego, and someone from the audience shouted out, "What's the best private eye novel ever written?" And we simultaneously said The Long Goodbye. And then kind of looked across the table at each other. You know, I think we do. I mean, at least the writers I've talked to, you know, Michael and Dennis Lehane and Lee Child and Jeff Parker, some other, you know, Joe Wambauer and people I kind of frequently talk to. We do have a set of those, you know, that you look at reverentially and that were big influences. It's funny, I'm about to talk in another interview about James Crumley, who wrote, you know, The Last Good Kiss, and who starts it with a sentence that very openly modeled upon the opening line of The Long Goodbye. You know, and he says, I start every discussion of this book saying that I'm one of the bastard children of Raymond Chandler. You know, so I mean, I think you look at the Raymond Chandlers, the Charles Willifords, Crumley, you know, so many, John MacDonald, Ross MacDonald. I could go on and on. I'm always a little reluctant about these lists because I'm afraid of leaving people out. But I also think if I have another minute, is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
As crime writers, I don't think we look far enough back. Mm-hmm. You know, I look back to the Greek tragedians.
Interesting.
All the themes that we write about are in Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles and those guys. I look back to Shakespeare, you know, Henry IV, and The Godfather is a retelling. It's the same plot as Henry IV, by the way. Was one of the first, you know, books in the English language or works in the English language to talk about the underclass. Mm-hmm. You know, you go from kings and princes, but then you're in the underworld. You're in a pub with prostitutes and pickpockets and Dickens. You know, tell me that Oliver Twist is not a crime novel.
You know, think about how interesting it would be to be in school. And because I have a lot of problems with education these days and the way kids are being taught. I mean, it just makes me crazy. But I was thinking that what if you taught from like a novel now going backwards or going the opposite way? So they were at least learning, here are some of the storylines, here's some of the tropes that are going to be, you know, all of these. And I think it would make reading a lot more interesting for them. Like historical fiction would make history a lot more fun. You know,
absolutely. You know, I think we teach plays in the wrong way. You know, if a class is going to see a Shakespeare play, what's the first thing we do? Make them sit down and read Shakespeare. Shakespeare was never intended to be read. Mm-mm. It was intended to be seen. That's where the excitement is. That's where the fun is, the color and the action and the drama and all of that stuff. Later, you can go back and read it and see how it's constructed, but it's meant to be seen. And sometimes I think we should teach some literature through cinema.
Yeah, and exactly. Go sit there and watch this, and then let's go back to the book it's based on. Let's watch this film and see what happened. Alex Michaelides, who wrote The Silent Patient last year, actually said when he grew up, he was living on a Greek island, and there was nothing to do but read. So he was reading all the Greek masters. And he said, that's really what the book is based on. Whereas I think most kids, if you told them that that's it, they're like, what are you talking about? People are not paying attention to where the inspiration for things comes from, deep.
Yeah, if you read Aeschylus's Orestes cycle, the 3 plays, and you substituted gangster characters in there, you have the plots of any number of modern gangster books and films, whether they're aware of it or not. Those themes of revenge and passion and ambition and corruption and power are all there, all laid out for you, So I go back to those works a lot if I'm having plot troubles or structure problems.
Do you read extensively? I mean, it seems like you do. Compare that to streaming, watching, and everything. Is it more reading?
More reading, definitely. The sad part is, well, it's not sad really, because I love it, but 90% of my reading is research reading, is work-related reading. So it's history and sociology and politics and chemistry or whatever, whatever the need is at the moment. So I don't have a lot of time to read for pleasure. But what I have done for the past 5 or 6 years is my wife and I have declared Sundays just to be nothing days. We don't accept invitations. We don't go out, and we just read all day. And so, morning till night. And usually, not right now, it's been really cold, but usually in Southern California, that means I can be outside. And so we live on an old ranch, and I'll take 1 or 2 books, 20 acres out, and sit on a rock under some trees and read all day. It's heaven.
Practice for social distancing. You can do classes. This is how to social distance.
Social distancing is a work technique for a writer. I don't want to be glib about this crisis because, it's not a lot to laugh about, but that's the stuff of my life. My wife went away for like a 3-week trip last spring. In those 3 weeks, I saw 1 person.
Wow. And you were happy. You were fine. You were fine. You were
I didn't notice. You know what I mean? Someone else pointed it out to me. I made 1 trip to the grocery store and stocked up, and the rest of the time I was just reading and writing.
Well, I think that you should maybe do classes right now on how you shop only for 3 weeks, like once every 3 weeks. And in our town, it was really funny. At the beginning, everything was running out of food at the supermarket. And I said to my husband, that's because everybody usually goes out to dinner and they have no idea what to buy.
Right.
And I went to the supermarket and there was 1 duck, and you're sitting there like, people had duck in a restaurant and now think they can cook it, because
not an easy dish to cook. My strategy on these things is I make chili and pasta, and then I have 3 meals. I have chili, I have pasta, and I have pasta with chili, and it will last for a long time. And
then you can just do anything else in between. It's not.
Yeah, you throw anything else on it or take it out. It's good.
It's not that important. So you have these mugs, these fabulous promotion mugs that the team made, and it says, I think I really do have to put on the glasses now. No matter how you come into this world, you come out broken. And that's the tagline. Was that yours? Did you come up with that this is what happens, or is this a marketing kind of a thing for the line?
I think both. I think I came up with it and then it became a marketing thing, if memory serves.
I'm not going to break them up.
No, not going to break them. I asked that. I said, maybe the mug should be broken, but then the utility of said mugs.
This is one of
questionable.
This is one of the really last fun packages that arrived before I left the office. So I stopped back. I've only been back into New York like twice. And I went and I said, I'm going to get the mug and the hardcover that the galley that I know is on my desk. And I've got to go back for those. So I trudged back in, so let's just go in and get two things. They're on my desk.
I'm flattered. I'm honored.
Well, I knew I wanted to read. I knew I wanted to read this. So you were a private investigator for many years. From those days, do you bring anything to what you write, or just
not really? I think I don't bring stories, but I think what being an investigator taught me to do is be a researcher, because that basically is your job, And so I think I brought the same research techniques to my work now that I had then, but not, look, being a private investigator is not a Raymond Chandler experience. It's the only time a tall, leggy blonde walked into my office to trumpet music was my wife, and I had Miles Davis on. So
nothing like that. Nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Nothing like that all day. So I know Lee Child recently interviewed you at the Center for Fiction, and I find it very interesting that you both own ranches now at this point. You're in Southern California, he's in Wyoming, which I just find it. I remember talking to Lee a couple of years ago, and he said, I'm going out there, I'm not so sure, I'm not so tentative. I
remember that too, yeah.
And now he seems completely into this.
Very happy.
Very happy. Asked you for ranching tips. Has he reached out to you?
No. And I would not be the guy to give them. We have livestock, but they're other people's that we let them graze. I mean, his ranch is huge. Mine is minuscule. So yeah, I don't think Lee needs any tips about either ranching or writing from Don Winslow.
So funny. I just thought the two of you, I thought, boy, this is like, totally different. So Power of the Dog, The Cartel, and The Border were sold to FX, and it was supposed to start later this fall. Is it still on schedule, or are we behind the pandemic at this point?
Oh, I think everything's going to be a little behind the pandemic, but it's in that phase of developing story and developing the Bible and everything. So maybe it's not so delayed, but nothing's shooting right now, obviously.
No, but I'm definitely looking forward to that. I have to ask, have you ever watched The Trade on Showtime? Have you ever watched that show, The Trade? This is a two-season series, and it's about the drug trade. And one is about addiction in the U.S. The second one is about people coming across the border. I just found it to be really a very interesting documentary.
There's a lot of great stuff out there. I never watch any of it, and not because I don't think it's any good, quite the contrary, but because I don't want to be influenced. I just want my own take and my own research and all of that. So I've never seen Traffic. I've never seen Narcos or Sicario or any of those things.
Interesting. Yeah. And I can understand that, though, because I think that there can be a tone or a tenor that comes in just from watching someplace else that makes it not original.
Yeah. And I want to keep very clean from that.
So with that in mind, what's next? And when can readers expect to see it? Next year, 2 years from now,
I don't know. I really don't. I'm always working on 2 or 3 things at a time. That's a little crazy, I know, but it's the way I like to do it. And then we'll see which of those horses has legs, and when we trot it out. So I know what I'm doing, but I'm not kind of ready to come out in public with that yet.
That's fine. I work with a lot of authors, and I always say, when you're ready to tell me, you'll tell me. And until then, I don't need to hear.
Yeah, and I'm kind of superstitious too. I kind of have this feeling that if I talk about it, if it comes out of my mouth too much, it won't come out of my fingers. I know that's goofy, but I don't talk about it at home. I don't, just like I think writers write, and we shouldn't maybe talk so much.
It's interesting because a lot of people are out doing so many events and doing all this kind of stuff. And it's like, how about just working harder on the writing? Because it makes such a big difference. It really will.
That's my job, and that's 95% of it. Yeah.
Well, you're brilliant at your job. This book is brilliant. Love these stories. And it was interesting because I always sat down and tried to read a whole one. And I was like trying to read them, not break it up, not get up until I finished a story, because I felt like that I was so in the moment with them. I didn't want to break up and walk away. So I congratulate you.
Thank you.
I think so much for spending time with us today. It's
Thank you.
finally got to caught up, you know.
Yay. Thanks for the time. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And you stay safe and well. And everybody out there, stay safe and well. And buy books from independent bookstores while we're.
Exactly. Yeah, we keep putting in links to those to keep them in business.
Please. Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much
It's
for your
been fun.
time.
Come up
Appreciate
to
it.
Rhode Island. We'll get you on a surfboard. We'll get you on.
I'm ready. I think.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so
Okay.
much.